Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. In this space, we've spoken often of Christian nationalism, its different strains, and its deep intertwining with the MAGA movement. We understand their governing philosophy as inherently theocratic and the apocalypticism that drives many in this milieu to literally seek the end of civilization. But what about another major driver of far right authoritarianism? The Silicon Valley tech oligarchs. What motivates them? Why do why do they partner with this group with whom they have so seemingly little in common? Is it greed or something else? My guest today has spent the last 15 years studying eschatology, the philosophy of human extinction, and sees something far more sinister than a desire for more tax cuts at work. Dr. Émile Torres is a moral philosopher, intellectual historian, and journalist whose work focuses on the ethics of emerging technologies, especially AI, and human extinction. They have published 4 books, the most recent of which is Human Extinction: A History of the Science and Ethics of Annihilation. In 2023, with Dr. Timnit Gebru, they coined the term TESCRAEL to denote a constellation of ideologies that have become very influential within Silicon Valley. These ideologies have played an integral role in launching, sustaining, and accelerating the current race to build artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which TESCRAEL advocates believe will usher in a utopian world of immortality, endless abundance, and space colonization, that is, unless godlike AI annihilates us instead. Torres has published in a wide range of academic journals, including Synthesis, Inquiry, Bioethics, Metaphilosophy, and Futures, as well as popular media outlets such as The Washington Post, New Statesman, Los Angeles Review of Books, Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, and Aeon. They are a contributing writer at Truthdig and formerly Salon. Torres received a BA in philosophy at the University of Maryland and an MS in neuroscience from Brandeis University. In 2023, they received their PhD in philosophy from Leibniz Universität Hannover in Germany and are currently a postdoctoral scholar at the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence at Case Western Reserve University. In this conversation, we'll learn about the TESCRAEL bundle of ideologies and the subtle differences between these different beliefs. We'll look at the consequences of carrying these ideas to their logical conclusions, as well as the uncanny overlap some of these philosophies share with Nazism. Before we dive in, please consider supporting Who's Left with a paid subscription. This is an independent media project. I don't paywall content, and I don't rely on advertising. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. Maybe I could make more money if I did things differently, but I am a terrible capitalist. So please, if you find value in this work, go to whosleft.us and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help me write more, research more, and organize more. Still, not ready for a long-term commitment? You can make a one-time contribution on Cash App or Venmo. Links are in the show notes. Me and my old body would like to spend less time on construction and more time constructing a better future for Indiana, but I need your financial support to do so. You can also help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. We are building a community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left, and I'm personally at ScottRogers78 on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, and Mastodon. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Thanks again. Now, here is my interview with Dr. Émile Torres. Dr. Émile Torres, welcome to the Who's Left podcast. Thanks.
Nice to be here.
I really appreciate you being here. You are one of the few people talking about the stuff that we're going to get into today. And it's just really interesting, potentially scary concepts. And the folks that are kind of in charge of our world right now, a lot of them are into some unusual things.
I think that's accurate. Fortunately, even though I've been talking about this for a while and have been kind of a lone voice in the wilderness, as it were, that's starting to change. So there are more and more people who are seeing good reasons to be thinking, writing, speaking out about these issues, because they're starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together and understand that the ideologies we'll discuss really are massively influential. I mean, I've said before, like the world is just replete with different, extreme ideologies that are potentially really dangerous and so on. But there's no point in talking about most of them because they aren't influential. They don't have a huge amount of power. That's not the
Yeah.
case with transhumanism, long-termism, and the others. So yeah, it's like we were saying before. I mean, it's a very bizarre moment where these like really radical ideologies have sort of taken root in centers of power like Silicon Valley, and are now influencing the world that we live in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So we're talking about, you know, extremist ideologies, right?
yeah,
And if you look at the leadership in this country right now, and you've got the Trump administration, maybe not Trump personally. I really do think he's all about personal enrichment, and that's kind of it.
yeah.
But the
I
people
agree with
around
that.
him, if you look at Mike Johnson and the Christian nationalist folks,
Mm,
um, that's kind of an ongoing movement. The religious right has been sort of building in power for the last 50, 60 years,
mhm,
has gotten more extreme. We've talked about Christian nationalism in its various iterations,
mhm,
the Pentecostal iteration, the Catholics, um, all kind of have their own flavor
mhm,
of religious extremism.
mhm,
And yet these wildly diverse groups have sort of come into coalition over the last several years.
mhm.
And along with that coalition now, which I think we have a pretty good understanding of, Christian nationalism. There's been a lot of talk about it.
Mhm.
But with the introduction of this tech element, the
Mhm.
the the, the broligarchs, right, the Silicon Valley cadre.
Sometimes
um
called the trolligarchs as well.
I've not heard that one. I'm
Yeah.
gonna add that to the lexicon. But these folks, a lot of times when you hear about their motivation, right? It's,
Mhm.
well, they're in it for tax cuts. They want to lower their tax dependency. They don't want to pay for us sad poors. They just want
Mhm.
to keep all of the money flowing around the country for themselves. And yeah, maybe there's some of that, sure, but to what end?
Mhm.
There is a distinct extreme quasi-religious worldview
Mhm.
floating around in that milieu, and you are sort of the expert in that field, and that's why I invited you here today
Yeah.
to talk about something. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've sort of coined the term TESCREAL, right?
Yes, that's right. So there was a collaboration with the computer scientist Timnit Gebru that she initiated. This was back in, I guess, late 2022 or early 2023.
Mhm.
And in the process of writing, co-authoring a paper with her, uh, I I thought maybe to streamline our discussion, it would be useful to have this acronym.
Mm.
TESCREAL goes from transhumanism to long-termism.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. So, it's a big old acronym. There are multiple parts. So, if we could define it and sort of go through the different, I don't know, flavors within this bundle, and talk about their maybe subtle differences.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh. So the I think the backbone of the TESCREAL bundle is transhumanism. In
Okay.
particular, a kind of libertarian transhumanism. The
Mm.
first instance of which was extropianism. So that's the E in TESCREAL. So transhumanists argue that we ought to develop advanced technologies in order to radically re-engineer the human organism to create ultimately a new post-human species, right? And tangled up with this idea of post-humanity are utopian visions of what we could become, and sort of the world that would result from us transcending our biological limitations, right? So we could gain immortality, we could radically augment our mental capacities, um, we could gain perfect happiness, happiness forever. So it's literally a utopian vision that is at the heart of the transhumanist movement. And again, I think that's the backbone of the bundle. So if you understand transhumanism, I think understanding the rest of the TESCRO ideologies becomes a lot easier, right? So extropianism is just a version of transhumanism, really the first organized modern transhumanist movement. Um, the next letter in the acronym is S for singularitarianism. This is another version of transhumanism. So the emphases are just a little bit different, but the basic idea is the same. We're going to merge with machines, and by developing advanced artificial intelligence, we're ultimately going to trigger what they call the singularity, right? So it's this
Mm.
this fundamental transition that has importance not just within human history, but within cosmic history as a whole. So this is a moment we merge with machines, we go out, we colonize the universe, we spread the light of consciousness to other galaxies. And as Ray Kurzweil, the most influential singularitarian, would put it, the universe itself then will wake up, right? So this is transhumanism plus this other idea of developing advanced AI, merging with machines, colonizing space. And then cosmism uh, is is yet another variant of transhumanism that is similar in certain respects to singularitarianism.
Mm.
Its emphasis is not so much on the singularity, but on going out and re-engineering the universe itself. Right. So it's basically saying, like, why stop at just re-engineering humanity? Why not do that to the universe as a whole? Right. So we'll develop what cosmists refer to as future scientific magic that enables us to intervene upon the fundamental fabric of space and time to reorganize the universe in ways that we find to be desirable, right? And so,
Okay.
and do we need the singularity for that? Do we need, super intelligence? Not necessarily. Maybe there are other technologies we could develop that would enable us to go out, colonize space, and so on. So it's cosmism is compatible with singularitarianism, but isn't built upon it, right? And
These are the subtle differences that distinguish these things. Yeah. So
yeah,
transhumanism, like, kind of is going beyond our stupid meat sacks, and
exactly. Yes,
take yes our where our consciousness goes out into the universe and survives, and extropianism means, like, beyond Earth. Is that what that means, like, literally,
so I
kind
think
of?
the emphasis for emphasis within transhumanism and extropianism is really just post-humanity, right? So
Okay.
the early transhumanists and extropians didn't really say all that much about space colonization. Like
Mhm.
it's there in their literature, but it wasn't like a main focus. The main focus was really re-engineering humanity. And then singularitarians came along, and the cosmos as well, and they said, yeah, why stop at just transforming humanity? Let's transform the entire universe. So it's sort of like transhumanism on steroids. It's this
Yeah.
even more grandiose version of transhumanism. Does that make sense?
Sure, sure, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, none of it makes sense, but yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I'm following along. Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
As I've
and
said to
was so
people in
no,
the
but
past, if it doesn't make sense, you might be following. Yeah,
but these, I'm hearing keywords, and
yeah.
we're colonizing the stars. That sounds like stuff Elon Musk talks about when you hear about the singularity. It definitely sounds like this is the reason there's this massive unconstrained rush to make generative AI.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
I mean,
then
I think the TESCREAL ideologies have played a really important role in launching, sustaining, and accelerating the race to build AGI, right? And systems like ChatGPT, which millions and millions of people now use, these are seen as the stepping stones to AGI,
mm,
right? So these are like pre or sub AGI systems. So they're not quite at the human level of quote unquote intelligence, but they're dots on the path leading us there, right? So that's why it's so important to develop these systems, and it's the reason that all of the leading AI companies, going back to DeepMind, was really the first one with the explicit goal of building
yeah.
AGI that got a lot of funding. All of them have emerged out of the test grill movement, because it was
Wow. Yeah.
these test grillists who are thinking, okay, well, what we want is to create utopia or to engage in what they themselves refer to as paradise engineering. How are we going to engineer paradise? Well, the most straightforward way to do that is to create a super intelligence, right? Because if you have a super intelligence, then you have a super engineer. And if you have a super engineer, you just delegate it the task of engineering paradise, right? So this
Is
was the
this,
underlying motivation.
yeah, ChatGPT, write this essay for me. No, ChatGPT, re-engineer the universe for me,
Yeah.
basically.
So ChatGPT, like 20.0 or whatever, like maybe
Yeah.
that will be the super intelligence where we could give it that prompt, right?
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
So that gets us through the TESC. What's the R?
Yeah. Okay. So that stands for rationalism. And I'll give you an example now of why I thought it was a good idea to use this acronym, which I am not claiming is pretty or particularly memorable. It's kind of an ugly, clunky term, but it has usefulness. And so the example is rationalism was founded by a guy named Eliezer Yudkowsky, who was a transhumanist who participated in the extropian movement, was also a leading singularitarian in the early 2000s, has
Mm,
close and extensive ties to cosmism. And then also, sort of looking at the other direction with respect to the acronym, he's very much involved in, or has, is very influential within the effective altruist, the EA movement, as well as within the long termist movement. And so you can imagine, like when Gumbroo and I were writing this article, we were listing all of the different affiliations of lots and lots of people. And it became so cumbersome. Saying
mm,
this person is transhumanist, extropian, singularitarian, as well as a cosmist and rationalist. So that was the impetus for the acronym. So rationalism is basically the idea that this is the way I put it before. If we're going to build utopia, we're going to need a lot of, or even if we're going to build super intelligence, which would enable us to build utopia, we're going to need a lot of really smart people doing really quote unquote smart things, right?
mm.
And so, what if we take a step back and figure out the best ways to optimize our intelligence, our smartness, and our rationality, right? And so they're really interested um, in ideas within a field of philosophy, but also has relevance to economics and in other domains called decision theory. So, how is it that we
Sure.
make rational decisions when confronted with multiple different options for us to pursue? Um, and they're also very interested in cognitive biases, right? So there are
Mm.
all sorts of biases that every one of us just naturally kind of suffers from, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there,
this was a big thing around 2020. We talked about a lot with cognitive bias, vis-a-vis racism.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, funnily enough, these people are not too concerned with those sorts of biases at all. They're much more interested in biases that are kind of, what's the best description? I mean, they're kind of quantitative in a sense. They're more theoretical. Uh,
Yeah.
so biases like one would be scope neglect, right? So this is the bias that relates to the fact that we're just not good with big numbers, right? And so,
Mm.
like a related example might be uh, imagine that you hear that four people have been shot. Some like horrific tragedy in town. Four people have been shot and killed. That kind of hits a lot of us in the gut. We could sort of feel it
Yeah,
viscerally
yeah,
for human beings. But if you learn that, if you read in the newspaper that in this war there were 1 million, uh, 1 million people who died in
yeah.
a conflict, and then the paper prints a retraction, says actually it was four less than 1 million, or it was four more than 1 million. You'd go like I don't know, it just doesn't. It's just a number, I
Doesn't
mean,
move the needle. Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't really move the needle. Stalin famously said, he did actually say this, but the quote that's often attributed to him has been modified a little bit. But the quote is, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." Right. So this gestures at a cognitive
yeah.
bias that we're all we're all influenced by to some extent, and rationalists are interested in trying to root out these cognitive biases. So all of this sounds good until you because we all want to neutralize the biases.
You turn it on its head, and it's could be well, really. I mean, yeah, one's a tragedy, two's a tragedy. What? Why is a million many much worse? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can see where this is going. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and really, I would say this about all of these ideologies. Like from a distance, there's something appealing about them.
Hmm.
Like wanting to radically ameliorate the human condition by replacing it with a new and better post-human condition. Like, okay, I guess that sounds pretty good. Same with rationalism. We want to optimize our rationality. All of us presumably want to do that. When you look at the details, it turns out that the the approach, the particular kind of rationality that rationalists are interested in is very strange and very kind of extreme. So, like here's one example. Yudkowsky, the founder of rationalism, again, this transhumanist, extropian, etc., he wrote an article in which he asked readers, if you're in a forced choice situation, and the two choices are, on the one hand, somebody being tortured mercilessly for 50 years, right? There's no respite. It's just awful, awful, awful for that poor individual. On the other hand, you have some unfathomably large number of people who suffer the almost imperceptible discomfort of having a speck of dust in their eye, right? Which of those would you choose? In other words, which is worse? And he would say, well, if you crunch the numbers, the total amount of suffering caused by all of these individuals, trillions and trillions of people having a speck of dust in their eye, the total amount of suffering is actually greater than somebody being tortured. And so you should choose that person being tortured because that is the better option with less suffering. Right. So this is rationalism in action.
This is a
Right.
really twisted version of the trolley problem.
It is. Yeah. It's very much like that. I mean, the trolley problem uh, definitely foregrounds intuitions that people have with respect to utilitarianism, this ethical theory.
Hmm.
And utilitarianism has been hugely influential among people in the test grill movement. And utilitarianism really is it's just about crunching the numbers. I mean, it's ethics as uh, calculations. It's ethics as number crunching. And so if you crunch Yudkowsky's term is shut up and multiply. That's what you should do in these sort of moral decisions situations. Just crunch the numbers. And if you do that, you'll see that all of these people having a speck of dust in their eye, that is actually much worse than one person being tortured for 50 years.
Mm. So yeah, this sounds like the next part, the EA, effective altruism, which is one that sort of poked through into the popular consciousness, I believe, in the last couple of years around Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
And this guy, is now in prison. I don't know if he's had his trial and all that yet, but the guy is allegedly a huge con man who
Yep.
who, who did this massive crypto Ponzi scheme, and the whole point of it was just to accumulate as much money as fast as possible so
Yeah.
he could do this effective altruism stuff. So can you
Yes.
describe that one?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. By the way, so he has been found guilty. He is in
Okay,
prison,
yeah.
in federal prison right now for decades. um,
So I don't
and
have to say allegedly anymore.
exactly, you
Yeah.
don't need to say that. In fact, he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson not that long
Hmm.
ago, and it was like an hour-long interview. He was in prison doing this interview, and a lot of us who knew about it were wondering, how did he manage that? Like in prison. Turns out that he wasn't allowed to give this interview. And last I heard, he was in solitary confinement as a result of this. So
Oh
this is a
wow.
guy he's just a habitual breaker of the rules, you know. But he's also a hardcore utilitarian. And that is what led him into effective altruism. Effective altruism is really the sibling of rationalism. It also emerged out of the transhumanist TESCREAL movement. And the idea, whereas rationalism aims to optimize our rationality, effective altruism aims to optimize our morality. And so, again, this sounds good from a
Sounds
distance.
great. Yeah.
We want to be the most effective altruists we could possibly be in the world, to help others in the most effective manner possible. When you look at the details, though, the whole thing starts to fall apart, right? So one of the key ideas of effective altruism is what they called earn to give, and
Hmm. Yeah.
the argument was
Or
that,
steal to give, as it were.
yeah,
Con to
exactly,
give. Yes. Yes.
earn to give. So Bankman Fried was the great success story of earn to give. There was an article, which is a very glowing article, and I think it was Semaphore. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the
I'll
case.
look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Okay, great. That described Bankman Fried's aim as being, quote, to get filthy rich for charity's sake, right? And so this is the idea of earn to give. Imagine that you go and work for a nonprofit, right? You might do a certain amount of good during your career, right? 80,000 hours is what the average is the average amount of time that people spend working throughout their lives. So you might do a certain amount of good over the course of 80,000 hours. But now imagine you go and work on Wall Street, or for an arms dealer, or for a
Hmm.
petrochemical company. And so
Hmm.
consequently, in this lucrative job, you make millions of dollars and then you donate that money to the nonprofit. Then they can hire not one person, but like 50 people, right? Consequently, the total amount of good you could do, this is their claim at least, by working for, a Wall Street company, a petrochemical
Hmm.
company, and so on, would in total over the course of 80,000 hours be much greater. What is left out of this picture are things that matter to a lot of people, like moral integrity,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is, as some critics have pointed out, I mean, this is an argument for being a Nazi prison guard, right? Like if it pays a lot of money, then maybe you just accumulate all that money and donate it to a charity to help the Jewish people during World War II, or whatever. And but a lot of people would find that to be utterly abhorrent, right?
Yeah.
Something's, if that's your conclusion, something has gone seriously wrong with your argument. So
Like,
this
it's
this is
okay if you do some real shady stuff as long as the gains from said shady stuff are put to good use, such that in the end it washes out, uh times whatever how much bad
exactly,
you've done. Yeah.
it washes out times. That's the important part. Um, is all of this is consistent with utilitarianism, because utilitarianism says there is nothing intrinsically morally wrong with any given action, right? The rightness or the wrongness of an action comes down entirely to the outcome, to the consequences, right? So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with murder, fraud, stealing, cheating, et cetera, et cetera. So you could see how Sam Bankman-Fried, who is a hardcore utilitarian, and really embraced this effective altruist idea of earning to give, you could see how he would then engage in a little bit of fraud, because he's saying, well, look, the amount of good, I'm bringing in billions and billions of dollars, and I'm going to donate, this was his claim at least, I'm going to donate like 99% of that
Hmm.
to charity. So the amount of good that I'll do by donating all this money justifies me having committed a little bit of fraud, right? So at the heart of utilitarianism is this idea of the ends justifying the means, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just the consequence that matters. This is one of the reasons people don't like philosophers don't like utilitarianism. Is it's all about like number crunching, and it's very quantitative, and it doesn't take seriously things like moral integrity, um,
Yeah.
or the value of people. Right? It does not see people as means in and of themselves. It just sees people as, I think I said that wrong. Sorry. It does not see people as ends in and of themselves. It just sees them as means to an end, right? The only reason that you and I matter on the utilitarian view is because we are the substrates or the containers or the vessels of value, which they take to be
Mhm.
like happiness or pleasurable experiences or something. The more pleasurable experiences that I generate in my life, the more value I have brought into the universe, right? And so here you have an argument then as soon as I'm in a situation where I'm bringing in disvalue, right? If I'm like depressed or I'm miserable or
Mhm.
something, I'm
Mhm.
subtracting from the total amount of value in the universe.
Mm.
Then it would be best if I just stopped existing, right? That would follow the utilitarian view.
Yeah, yeah. And so the and you, again, we can see where this is going when you add the last element, the L, the long termism. Well, that stretches out the timeline for which the good you do can can be multiplied. So yeah, maybe you're doing some nasty stuff right now, but think of all the theoretical people, you know, billions of years from now, right?
Or trillions.
Mm,
Yeah. And if I may add one last thought, if you don't mind, to what I was saying before, I
please.
think utilitarianism has or can have at least a natural appeal to individuals like in Silicon Valley, right? Because there's a sense in which utilitarianism is just capitalism as an ethical theory, right? It's all
Mhm.
about maximizing something. In the case of capitalism, it's profit. In the case of utilitarianism, it's the thing this thing they call value or pleasurable experiences, something like that. Um, and capitalism is easy to understand. You just crunch the numbers. You just you speculate about the expected
Yeah.
value of different actions. You do the exact same thing with utilitarianism, and so it's a very simplistic ethical theory that I think consequently has this natural appeal to capitalists who don't have to go out of their way to think more deeply about ethics, right?
Yeah.
They
You
just
don't have
yeah
to be altruistic, just effectively
yeah.
altruistic. Yeah.
And so you're totally right about long termism. So utilitarians in the past tended to, so I'm talking like decades and centuries ago. Um, Utilitarianism was actually developed right around the time that industrial capitalism emerged. I'm not sure that that's a coincidence. We're
Mhm.
talking a couple centuries ago, um, and initially the focus was on the consequences of your actions in the near term, right? And
Yeah.
there just wasn't this kind of big picture way of thinking uh, about the future, right? So they just hadn't considered this possibility that maybe what we should be doing is weighing not just the near term consequences of our actions, but the very long term consequences. And so this leads to long termism. When you take
Yeah.
this like more cosmic view of our place in space and time, and you apply utilitarianism to it, then you realize, oh, actually, there could be huge numbers of people in the future, right? Carl Sagan, the famous cosmologist, in a 1983 article, I believe, was the first one ever to calculate how many future people there could be. And he said if the population remains fixed and humanity, Homo sapiens, our species, survives for 10 million years, um, and the average lifespan is about 100 years, he said there could be 500 trillion future people. And so long termists sort of looked at this and went, wait a second, we might exist for much longer than 10 million years. Earth will remain
Mm.
habitable for a billion years, roughly. That's way, way, way longer than our species, way longer than civilization has existed, and definitely longer than our species has been around, which is about 300,000 years. So 300,000 years versus
Yeah.
a billion. And so even more than that, if we go out and colonize space, then we could create this vast, sprawling, multi-galactic civilization in which there are trillions and trillions and trillions of future people. And so,
Mm.
consequently, if what matters is the outcome or the ripple effects or the consequences of our actions, we should consider how our actions today might influence those very far future people. And so, even if you influence a tiny fraction of those future people, numbering in the trillions and trillions and trillions, you may still be influencing a greater number than the total human
Yeah.
population today, right? And so this is this is long termism. It builds on effective altruism in the following way: if the goal is to positively influence the greatest number of people possible, and if most people who will ever exist will exist in the very far future, then what we should be doing is focusing right now on those far future people rather than contemporary people. Right? And this is just a numbers game. It's not that future people matter more. It's just that there are so many more of
There's
them.
more of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's long termism. The value of our actions today are largely or almost entirely determined by the outcome, by the consequences,
Yeah.
millions, billions, and trillions of years from
So, if you're acting on behalf of these theoretical future people, or maybe even not people, just future consciousnesses that live in cohabitation with artificial intelligence or something, if you're acting on behalf of these theoretical entities,
now.
well, fuck people now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
or
and
rather,
so that, yeah.
so they would add one qualification. Um, Long termism doesn't mean you shouldn't care about contemporary people. What it means,
Hmm.
though, is that you should only care about contemporary people insofar as doing that will influence the far future. Does
Hmm.
that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
not, once again, you're seeing people as a means to an end, right? And so perhaps the reason you should um, um, alleviate global poverty is that alleviating global poverty will make it more probable that we realize this, to quote one long-termist, vast and glorious future in the cosmos. Once we become post-humans, we spread beyond Earth, colonize space, and so on. So that's the little catch. It's ethics as a branch of economics. I've said that
Yeah.
before, and yeah, from that perspective, long-termism makes sense, right? And
Yeah.
I would
You might
argue that
have
you should
to.
not take that perspective in the first place.
No, so so you might have to break some eggs, most of the eggs on the planet, to make the most amazing super cosmic omelet billions of years from
Yeah, so I love the way you put that because that is exactly right. This idea of ends justifying means is the same as, like, you got to, maybe you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, but the omelet is worth it, right? In this cost benefit analysis, which is what utilitarians take ethics to be, essentially. In this cost benefit analysis, the omelet, it is a benefit that is worth the cost of cracking. So obviously, in the metaphor, like, cracking the eggs
now.
might be doing something that hurts people in the contemporary world. And if that's the case, then I don't know, so be it. Like in absolute terms, causing harm to people in the present might be very significant, right? And long terms would acknowledge that. In relative terms, relative to the amount of value that could exist in the future, it's nothing, right? It's a molecule in a drop in the ocean. And
Yeah.
this is
Hmm.
one reason
Hmm.
I've argued that these ideologies can be very dangerous because they have all of the ingredients needed to quote unquote justify extreme measures right now in order to protect
Hmm.
and preserve this vast and glorious utopian future.
That's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like, okay, well, so listen, us, the best and the brightest there are now, us tech magnates and, super geniuses,
Yeah,
need to basically control all of the world's resources
yeah,
so we can build this singularity. We can build this thing that will deliver us utopia, uh, damn whatever happens now, if we have to sacrifice the entire global south, if we have to, yeah, basically accelerate climate change
Yeah.
and leave it so there's only a handful of people on the planet, well, those handful of people on the planet are going to repopulate the stars, man. It's fine.
Yeah. So, with respect to climate change, um, absolutely, a lot of people in this community aren't that concerned with it,
Mm.
precisely because they don't see it as a threat to the long term future of humanity.
But
And there
they
are
don't
people,
reject it, right? Like they know it's happening.
they know it's happening, but a lot of them minimize it quite a bit and say, well, it's just not going to be that big of a deal.
Won't
There
matter
was
in
a,
the long term. Yeah.
yeah, and there are even some people in the AI community, people at some of these companies that are trying to build AGI who explicitly argue that yes, the stepping stones towards AGI, ChatGPT, et cetera, these are increasing the carbon footprint of companies like
Mm-hmm.
Google and Microsoft and so on. I think Microsoft's carbon foot
Huge.
huge. I think it was a
They just
40,
fired 3 Mile Island back up.
yeah. So there's a huge energy cost to
Yeah.
these, and quite significant carbon footprint. I think Microsoft's carbon footprint increased by some. It was in the 40s. I can't remember if it was 43 or 47% since I think it was 2020, and the reason is
Wow.
AI. But what they
Yeah.
argue is that once we have advanced AI, once we have artificial general intelligence or AGI, then we will be able to solve the climate crisis, right? Because then we'll just be able to offload the what they see as an engineering problem, the engineering problem of climate change to the AGIs. And the AGIs being so smart, it will
Mm.
figure out a way to reverse climate change and so on. So they're plowing ahead with the building of this technology, resulting in the climate crisis being exacerbated, getting worse. But they're justifying it by saying, well, yeah, but in the end, there will be this like utopian technology that will say, hey, can you solve climate change? And it'll think for like maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And then it'll go, okay, yeah, now I have a solution, a technological solution in particular,
Mm.
and then it'll implement that, and everything will be fine. So if they're wrong about this, which I'm almost certain that they are,
That's
I'm
a pretty
very
big damn
skeptical.
assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's sort of like, it's somebody saying, I'm in my mid 40s. I think I'm going to start smoking because I believe in 20 or 30 years when I get cancer, they'll have a cure. Maybe they will, but this isn't a good reason to start smoking, right? Maybe they won't have a cure in 20 or 30 years. So it's kind of a similar logic to that.
You mentioned utilitarianism kind of arising out of the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution, and this bundle of philosophies sort of arising out of this tech revolution, and it really just sounds like an elaborate way to excuse your worst behavior.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing I've said in the past is that long-termism, which is really like if transhumanism is the backbone of the bundle, long-termism is like the galaxy brain, referencing the online meme, the galaxy brain
Mm-hmm.
that sits atop the backbone, because it binds together a lot of the important ideas and themes, et cetera, that are prominent in the other ideologies. So what I've said before is that long-termism not only tells the wealthy elite that you are morally excused from helping the global poor or caring about climate change, etc. It says you are a morally better person. You're a superior person for focusing on the far future, because the amount of value in the far future could be huge, astronomically larger than the amount of value that exists right now. So you are better than the average person out there, maybe who's like giving to charity to help poor people in certain regions of the world, or giving to climate charities, etc. Um, you're better than them, because you understand
Yeah.
what the priorities are, and the real priority is the far future of humanity, because that is what's going to be vast and glorious. It's just going to be much, much, much bigger than the present. And so it tells these billionaires exactly what they want to hear. And I think this is part of the appeal of this ideology, it's a huge pat on the back, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think you're completely right. And another way to put this is there's there have always been excuses for why
Mhm.
wealthy individuals shouldn't help poor people. There's always another excuse, and this could be seen as just the most recent excuse like that. You know, well, I don't really want to help poor people. Ah, now I came across this ideology that says I absolutely don't. In fact, I'm morally obligated not to help them. You know, even though or maybe I should help them, but only insofar as doing so will benefit the very far future of humanity.
Or furthermore,
Yeah,
their very existence might be dragging down the potential future of humanity, and maybe we need to eliminate some of these lesser others. I mean, this thing sounds like you could definitely walk right into eugenics.
yeah, absolutely. So I think eugenics is at the core of all of these ideologies. I mean, transhumanism is uncontroversially considered to be a version of eugenics. It's so-called liberal eugenics, but there's I think that that's a misnomer. There's nothing really
Mhm.
liberal about it. But yeah, I mean, there are two French scholars who coined the phrase "the eternal return of eugenics," which is really powerful and points to I think a very important idea because eugenics goes back to the origins of the Western tradition, right? So Plato,
Mhm.
Aristotle, they advocated for eugenic policies. Ancient Roman law codified eugenic ideas. So the term didn't exist then. The term wasn't coined until
Right.
1883. Uh, but the idea has been around for a long time, and it just keeps popping up over and over again throughout history, during the Enlightenment, during the Middle Ages, before that.
Hmm.
Obviously, like Nazi Germany
Yeah.
is the most notable example of that. But Nazi Germany, their policies were inspired by policies that were implemented by progressives here in the U.S. Right?
Yep. Yep. I learned
And
it by
so,
watching you.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, California had its eugenics program from 1909 to 1979, so implemented during the progressive
I'm
era in the
sorry. Did you
U.S.
say 1979?
to 79. So there is
Oh,
continuity of eugenics throughout the 20th century. It did not disappear after the Nazi atrocities became widely known. In fact, there were a whole bunch of countries that were occupied by Nazi Germany, and when the occupation ended at the with the culmination of World War II,
yeah.
they implemented their own eugenic uh, laws. Right? Japan did the exact same thing. They had their Eugenic Protection Act or law. I can't remember the exact title. I think that was implemented in 1948 or so, and that lasted
Again, I'll look that up. Yeah.
yeah a couple decades. So so I think that the whole TESCREAL movement is just the most recent iteration of this eternal return of eugenics. I also think that you're completely right that there are racist elements. Like there are some groups of people who maybe shouldn't exist, some of them would put it a little bit different than that. They would say it doesn't really matter if they don't exist. So maybe we don't like
Hmm.
actively go out and try to eliminate them. But so one example comes from a very prominent figure within the long-termist movement, one of the co-founders of the long-termist ideology, a guy who was an effective altruist initially, and he wrote this PhD dissertation and it published in 2013, which is widely cited in that community. And he argued that since the far future is of overwhelming, that's his term, overwhelming moral importance, if we're in a situation, which we are because we have finite resources, where we have to choose between saving the life of somebody in a rich country versus saving the life of somebody in a poor country, we should go with saving the life of somebody in a rich country, all other things being equal. And the reason is people in rich countries are going to be better positioned to influence the very far future of humanity than people in poor countries. So this is exactly
Yeah.
that idea of like it's more of a passive, like, well, if they die over there, that group disappears. It's just not it's just not a big deal. Take a grand cosmic perspective on everything. If that group disappears, it just doesn't matter that much. If our group here in like the global north, you know, with all our technological innovation, so if we disappear, then that could have serious consequences for the probability of realizing this utopia, right? So it matters much more that we persist. This is the logic, and
Wow.
perhaps people
Yeah,
can
and it
seem kind of
really
critical of these ideologies.
yeah, and it really doesn't even matter if most of us persist. Really, it's just those, super geniuses like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and the folks that have the bunkers that are gonna, survive the uprising and all the climate change, and it's their spawn that will survive into the future, and that they will their consciousness will persist into the stars, not ours.
Yeah, we mentioned Sam Bankman-Fried earlier, uh,
Hmm.
and it came out after his cryptocurrency platform FTX collapsed that his brother, who I think his brother worked, so I'm almost certain about this. His brother worked for FTX, and he was communicating with somebody else about potentially buying. They had plans to, or at least they were talking about plans, concepts of a plan, if you will,
Hmm.
for buying the island nation of Nauru. And they literally wrote in their text messages that in the case of a global catastrophe that kills 99.99% of humanity, the goal would be to have built a bunker on Nauru, populated by effective altruists and long termists to repopulate the
Hmm.
planet
Ah,
after
there it
the
is. There
catastrophe.
it
There
is.
it is, right? So you're totally right about that, and even more, it's not. I mean, the reason that that these really smart people, these geniuses, trust me, they're not geniuses. People like Musk and so on, but these people who consider themselves to be geniuses, like Yudkowsky, who's repeatedly described himself as a genius, the reason why they matter in the grand cosmic scheme of things is that they are the, to borrow a term from Nick Bostrom, another noted figure in this community, their brains are the birth canals through which the future is going to be born, right? They're the ones who are going to build the technology in the right way to actually bring about this post-human utopian world, right? And so ultimately the goal then is to hand off the existential baton to our post-human successors, right? So the goal, the near-term goal, is to replace the human world with a new post-human world, right? This is why I have described these ideologies as pro-extinctionist, right?
Yeah.
They're some of them are very explicit about this. Others are, sort of beat around the bush a bit more. But the goal is to replace our species, which they don't like, right? They're revolting against humanity. To quote a scholar named Adam Kirsch, they're revolting against humanity, and the form of that revolt is the advocacy of creating posthumans to ultimately run and rule the world, right? So that's why it like matters that they, the the cognoscenti, the intellectual elite, why it
Yeah.
matters that they survive so much, because they're the ones who are going to usher in this new utopia in which our species just has no role to play because it's dominated by these much more quote unquote superior post-human beings.
They're it's like they're accelerating toward the end of humanity. And in my way, I mean, that's what you're describing is eschatology, right? It's the end of the world.
Yeah,
So I can kind of see how they can form this uneasy, weird coalition with the fundamentalist Christians or these like messianic Jewish supremacists in Israel, the Christian Zionists who want all the Jewish people to be in Israel so they can kill them. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, but they're all, it seems like, trying to forward to the end of the world, uh, where they get to see who's right.
yeah. So I think are totally right about that. There definitely are some differences, some important differences between Christianity and Tuscrealism with respect to their
Hmm.
eschatological beliefs, but there are tons of parallels, right? So, like one that I think you were gesturing at just now, which is really important, is this idea that on the other side of the apocalypse or the end of the world as we know it
Yeah.
is
Yep.
utopia. Hence,
Yes.
the sooner we get the apocalypse, the sooner we get utopia, right? This is why you have some of these Christian apocalypticists out there who when there's a conflict that breaks out in the Middle East, they're kind of cheering for it, right?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, because they want that, maybe they're still apprehensive about the tribulation, depending on what their view of the when the rapture will occur. Some
Right.
are
Right.
post trib, so they think the
Oh yeah,
rapture will
you
happen
got the
after.
pre-millenarians and the post-millenarians. I can't keep them all straight, but either
Yeah,
way, they're
yeah,
they're they're trying to bring about the rapture.
exactly. Yes, and sooner that happens, the better. And it's kind of the same thing with the Tescralists. And you sort of have two camps within the Tescral movement. You have the accelerationists, right? That's the term that they
Hmm.
use. They think that the transition to a post-human world will go smoothly, right? There's nothing much to worry about. Then you have the doomers. They think that the
Mm.
transition to a post-human world is going to be really tricky. And if we want to get things right, we have to be super careful. So they are techno cautious, whereas the others are techno optimistic, right? And so
I see.
ultimately, their their eschatological vision is the exact same, right? They want post humanity. They want AIs to dominate. They want us to be able to go out colonize space and literally to create huge computer simulations full of trillions and trillions of digital people living in these simulated worlds. That is their goal. They all agree about that. The only difference is the riskiness of getting there.
Yeah.
So, like the doomers say, actually, like, sure, we need superintelligence to create this new post human era. But I think superintelligence might be really dangerous because it might turn around and just destroy us and, along with us, this whole utopian future that we could have created. If it does that, then we lose everything, right? So we need to be super careful moving forward. And the accelerationists, their only point of disagreement is that no, I think superintelligence is almost certainly going to give us exactly what we want. It's going to result in utopia. It's not going to destroy us. Don't don't fret so much. So yeah, so I guess I mean there is some kind of parallel also within Christianity. Um, I haven't thought about this a ton, uh, but all of this like does kind of map onto Christian apocalypticism. I actually
Yeah.
just recently wrote an article about this. It was called Machine Learning MAGA. I don't come up with the titles, but I like this one. It published in Truthdig. They're very good with their titles. Um,
There we
and yeah, it basically argued that like the Tescrial eschatological narrative, end times narrative, is merging in really interesting ways with the
go.
Christian
Hmm.
narrative, right? So there's a growing number of Christians who are saying, yeah, maybe we are going to build superintelligence, and maybe that superintelligence is going to be the Antichrist. Maybe it all makes sense now. Others are saying, well, per- it could be the case that God is going to work through AI,
Yeah.
advanced AI, right? So there was a survey that I quote in the article that found that 77% of pastors who were asked said that yes, God can work through AI. So I don't think we're far from people seeing AI potentially as a new prophet, is some kind of messenger from God, especially as it gets better and better at spitting out strings of sentences that look,
Yeah.
compelling uh, and insightful. So maybe AI will be both. Maybe it'll be, the Antichrist and a prophet.
Like
So
this
so
is
this,
the Messiah. Yeah, that they've been waiting for or dreading. I don't know.
yeah, exactly,
Scary. Yeah.
yeah. So that's a really interesting way that these key themes within transhumanism are starting to be integrated into contemporary Christianity, especially in the U.S. And then on the other side, you have longtime transhumanists like Elon Musk, who are cozying up to Christianity, right? Elon Musk
Hmm.
was once like a diehard atheist. He now says he's a cultural Christian. Maybe it's just a matter of time before he says, I'm a full blown Christian. I read just the other day that Joe Rogan, who's very much a part of
Oh
the whole
yeah.
manosphere, that yeah, that Joe
Yeah,
Rogan has been.
it's the final capstone in the branding, really. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Once you f up too bad and you piss them off, you say you found God, and then you're good. Like Russell Brand is Catholic now. It's yeah, the same thing for sure.
yeah. So that's really fascinating because you have these people who are either in the transhumanist, like in the heart of the transhumanist movement, or are kind of on the periphery and somewhat sympathetic with it in certain ways, who are becoming open to Christianity and or have completely embraced Christianity. So that is a fascinating merger of these ideas of advanced technology that are at the very core of the transhumanist ideology. How those are being fitted together with Christian views about how the world will end. And it makes good sense because both views, they're pretty apocalyptic, right?
Yeah,
It only takes a few steps in either direction for them to merge entirely.
that's man, jeez, that scares the hell out of me because this is where I was driving at the end of this thing. Is like, okay, is the weird eschatological potential rift between these oligarchs, these Silicon Valley types, and
Mhm.
your Christian fundamentalists a point where maybe we could drive a wedge between them?
Yeah.
And it sounds like, yeah, no, things are coming together a lot quicker than I thought.
Yeah, this is exactly my thought. Was maybe this is a strategy for people on maybe this divergence, the what I would call, for lack of a better term, just my terms to try to keep things straight, is the MAGA traditionalists versus the MAGA transhumanists, right?
Hmm.
Maybe there, like you said, there's a way of driving this wedge between them, a way of accelerating the schism between the two groups. Alternatively, perhaps they are merging, and perhaps that merger will continue in the coming months and years, and you'll ultimately there won't be maybe like mainstream transhumanists will be Christians as well, and maybe a lot of mainstream Christians will basically be transhumanists. So I this like you said that this worries you. It really worries me as well. I mean, I've said before that when we list the greatest threats to humanity as a whole, oftentimes we include on the list things like nuclear conflict, maybe a global pandemic, an asteroid strike, perhaps like runaway climate change, something like that. I think on the list we should also include test realism, right? So I think that is a huge risk. In addition to, so we should consider ideological risks, not just these
Yeah.
physical risks. And so that is another reason that I'm very, very worried about the growing power, dominance, influence of these ideologies.
So I guess the last thing I want to ask you today is how do us normal people avoid this future? What can we do to prevent this congealing of these two weird fundamentalist strains into
Yeah.
something that threatens us all? You know, what are we going to do about it?
This is such an important question. This is a main topic of the research I'm trying to do right now. Because up until recently, I really didn't have a good answer. Like my answer was just my answer was boring. The best answer I could give was boring, which was read about the ideologies and then tell others about them. So just
Hmm.
increasing awareness. Um, but I think there are more steps that people can take. I mean, one is that there are mundane things one can do to resist AI, right? Like just refusing to use it. Um, uh, um, make sure you vote for individuals who understand what's happening. And there aren't that many right now, but that's starting to change a little
Yeah.
bit. So making your voice heard through the power of the ballot. Um, what else? I mean, I said until recently I didn't have a good answer. I kind of still don't have a great answer. I'm not really sure. This movement has so much power. and so much money behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
just before FTX collapsed, the effective altruist community itself had $46.1 billion in committed funding from super wealthy donors like Sam
Wow.
Bankman-Fried. Other examples would be Dustin Moskovitz, the co-founder of Facebook. He's very much a key figure, at least
Hmm.
with respect to funding within the Tesla movement. There is a cryptocurrency guy named Vitalik Buterin, who was the co-founder of Ethereum, and he has also donated just enormous sums of money to into this community. So there are other examples like that. They just have so much money, so much power that I really do feel pretty helpless right now. And along with that feeling of helplessness comes a feeling of hopelessness, you know. But I don't think it's completely hopeless. I do think that there are steps that all of us can take. I'm just still in the process of like articulating exactly what they are.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm
So
I'm
that's my
glad
best
that
answer.
you're yeah, I'm so glad you're out there kind of putting these things together and synthesizing these ideas where a lot of other folks are not. And I just really appreciate that. I appreciate your work. And I really
Thanks for
appreciate you
being
being here
interested
with
in the
us
topic.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a real pleasure to chat with you.
Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Torres.
Thanks. Take care.
Once again, that was Dr. Émile Torres, moral philosopher and postdoctoral scholar at the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence at Case Western Reserve University. That's a lot to digest, and I'm still digesting the 5 non-negotiables of the left from a couple weeks ago. I'm still putting together a platform along those lines for Indiana, and let's add an essay on today's topic to the list of writing I owe you all. Put it on my tab. I'm about to take a short vacation. But I will still be with you this Sunday morning, when I'll be back with an all-new panel of guests on Who's Left This Week. That airs live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on the Project Next Media Network, YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. Links in the show notes. It's a lot of fun. If you hadn't had a chance to check us out yet, I bring together panelists from the Democratic Socialist left to Never Trump conservatives, and we look at the week's headlines from around Indiana and beyond. We'll also dive into one big topic and throw in a few jokes for good measure. Hope to see you there in the comments, but feel free to reach out before then. My email is scott@whosleft.us. Thanks again to Dr. Torres. Learn more about their work at xriskology.com and consider buying their most recent book, Human Extinction, A History of the Science and Ethics of Annihilation. That is a college-level textbook and priced like it, so you may have better luck on the used market. And while you've got your credit card out, why not sign up for a paid subscription at whosleft.us, where you'll find all of my work. I'm also on Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at Who's Left, or on most other social media sites at ScottRodge78, where you can hit me up with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns. Please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.